Hi, I'm Pankaj Garg, and I'm a scientist in the antibody engineering team at Twist Biopharma. Today, I'm presenting a poster titled Synthetic DNA Technologies Enable Single-Domain Antibody Discovery at PEGS Europe in Lisbon. So at Twist Biopharma, we are leveraging Twist's unique capability of printing millions of oligos on a single chip. And we are using these oligos to build phage libraries, then that we can actually go pan and develop antibodies against any given target. So today I'm going to be describing in this poster some of the single domain antibody libraries that we built based on this unique Twist oligo printing technology. So for building these single domain antibody libraries, our first step was to actually generate or identify single domain antibody libraries. So from databases, we were able to identify 2,400 unique antibodies that we used to build many different antibody library designs. And these were all displayed on phage. So our very first design, which we call the VHH ratio library, was a very traditional approach of building libraries where you actually look at all your antibodies and you identify the ratio of or amino acid distribution at each of the CDR positions, and you incorporate that distribution in your library. And so we actually had, in our ratio library, we have an amino acid composition at each of these positions, which is actually presented here. Also, we have a length distribution and the CDR3 loops. So after we built this traditional VHH ratio library, we actually went beyond and looked at other libraries that we could build now that we have this unique capability of printing oligos. And so the other library that we built was, which we call the shuffle libraries. We have two such libraries. There's a VHH shuffle and the VHH shuffle. And the only difference between these two libraries is the H-shuffle is built on a partially humanized framework, whereas shuffle is built on a llama consensus framework. And in this approach, what we did was we actually took, again, that same database, which we had used to build the VHH ratio library, and we grouped out all the CDR1s in these antibodies, all the CDR2s, and all the CDR3s within these antibodies. And now what we did was we actually shuffled the CDRs. So we allowed each CDR1 to be paired up with each of the CDR2s and each of the CDR3s, and we built a library which we call the shuffle library. You can imagine it as being like an approach actually going a step beyond, where people have used light chain shuffling approach. Here we are showing that we can actually use a CDR shuffling approach to build phage libraries. So each of these libraries, we've actually validated each of these libraries against both soluble antigens and GPCR targets. And here's some of the data that we presented that shows that we were able to, using these libraries, we were able to pull out unique binders against TIGIT, also against CD47. And these binders actually have a range of affinities, and a lot of them are in single-digit nanomolar range. And in our competitive binding assay, each of these antibodies that we build, they actually compete off the natural ligand for these targets. We've also used these libraries to do, again, as I mentioned earlier, to pan against GPCR targets, and these are cell-based panning. And here I'm showing two examples from the GPCR panning, one being GLP-1R, the other is CRTH2. And for both of these targets, we were able to pull unique binders that actually bind to only the cells expressing the target of interest and not the background cells. One of the data point that I actually want to focus on is here is a specificity ELISA for our CDR, one of our antibodies that was coming from a CDR shuffle library, and this is a binder that actually binds GLP-1R. What we wanted to see was that now that we've used this shuffled approach, right, so this antibody that is binding GLP-1R has a CDR1 that is coming from an antibody that binds prealbumin, The CDR2 of this antibody is coming from an antibody that binds GFP, and CDR3 is coming from an antibody that binds TNF alpha, right? So these three antibodies binding to three different antigens, the CDRs came together to now make an antibody that binds to GLP-1R. And we wanted to see this new antibody that we've generated, does it bind to the original antigens from which these CDRs were derived? And here our specificity lies that shows that although the original antibodies are still binding to their targets of interest, the antibody that now we've created does not bind to any of these antigens. And I believe this is probably the first example, or first time we're showing that you can actually take a CDR shuffled approach to create specificity against completely new antigens. And these also have very high affinity. And we've also tested like a lot of downstream analysis and testing on developability, expression, TM, and they all behave really well. So with that, I would like to say that if you'd like to learn more about some of the data that I've presented here on our single domain antibodies, do stop by at my poster, or if you would like to learn about all the other antibodies that we are generating at Twist Biopharma, be it GPCR focus libraries, ion channel focus libraries, carbohydrate focus libraries, or hyperimmune libraries, do stop by at our booth, which we also have at this conference, or please feel free to message me on LinkedIn, or you can also visit our website at twistbiopharma.com.